Hello there ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to what I painted this month for July 2016. One of these days I will start getting these videos up on time, but as you can see, quite a lot was accomplished during July. Tons of terrain, mostly Dead Zone, and a couple of baleful realm gates for Age of Sigmar as well. And then as far as miniatures go, you can see that there are quite a few Dead Zone Plague in there. So much in fact that I can barely fit all of it into the thumbnail. And in fact you can see from the front here a little bit more on everything, sitting on top of the nice Dead Zone map there. And there are so many pictures here, so let's start whizzing through them, starting with the Plague. So these had been sat in a box for a really long time. I just never got around to painting them until now. And as you can see, they are done, and they are kind of pinky, orangey, yellowish, which is a colour scheme that I didn't really plan out too much. Basically, I sprayed them all white, then airbrushed the backs yellow, and then used a red glaze, and then went crazy with some dry brushing. And they ended up looking like this, which I am quite happy with. And then there's more detail as well, but for the ones at the back in particular, and the dogs, that's virtually where it ended apart from the blood. So the dry brushing itself, there's yellow dry brushing onto the back, and then there's white dry brushing all over. The yellow dry brush on the back was very heavy, and the white dry brush was quite light. And then when it came to the clothes, there was just a dark blue applied to all the trousers, which were then dry brushed in white as well. And then there was a wash put over those, I think it was Nuln Oil, and that was also put over the white vests. You can see how orangey yellow they are from the back. It's quite strong and striking, I think. We're going to be flying through these pictures now. So here is the big guy. Other than the eyes, I didn't think he needed any more detail, so I just went for some blood on the hands, so it looked like he's just ripped someone apart or maybe crushed them to death. And now this guy, climbing over, this is the first clear sight you've got of the rust effect that I've been using on a lot of this Dead Zone stuff, which is done with the Citadel Technical Paints Typhus Corrosion and Riser Rust, which Warhammer TV has a couple of tutorials for, which are very handy. And I've tried to make it look like he was carrying something bloody in his hand, and then as he was leaping over this barrier it kind of splattered against the top and started running down. You'll notice that all the blood that I've applied to these, and including the terrain as well for Dead Zone, whenever there's blood there I've tried to make it run down in the natural crevices that the blood would actually run down. Here's another one all covered in blood looking for a hug, and he's got a blood puddle on the floor in front of him there. This one very similar except with a different pose. Not too much else to say about those two. This is the Dr. Simmons, who is the only one who has an all purple outfit rather than the blue and white attire to make her stand out a bit. I think her eyes look quite good. To get that glowy effect, I just used a really bright green and then put a black wash around the eyes to give them that kind of sunken, sinister, eerie, zombie-ish kind of look. Now we're going to get to some of the regular stage 3s. One thing that's notable, the stains on their shirts are done with Typhus Corrosion, just a little blob of it. And they also have a couple of blood stains as well, which are with the Blood for the Blood God paint. And on his weapon there you can see that it's quite rusty. That's the same rust effect that I use on everything here, with the old Typhus Corrosion Riser Rust combo. So you're going to see a lot of that. Same on his weapon, you can see a nice blood stain there coming out of a bullet wound on his leg. I think the skin looks really good with the transition, with the airbrushed yellow onto the back. And then the work on top of that with the glaze and dry brushing. I think it looks quite a smooth transition. Nothing in particular to say about this guy, nor him. All pretty standard here. The dogs, a bit more blood on them and some blood around the mouth, and the same for this little chap here. So moving on to the Dead Zone terrain, first of all let's look at this tower. And the way this was done, this was painted in grey. You'll notice some of the pieces are actually more blue than others. Some of them are very grey, some of them are quite blue. That's because I didn't actually do the base coat on some of them. Somebody else did that for me a long time ago, and with the newer pieces that I've painted I've tried to match the colour. But my eye for colour isn't that great, so it's not a perfect match by any means, which isn't a big deal anyway. You can see that there's quite a lot of rust going on here on the front of these structures and on the tops as well. A few little orange details in there as well to break it up. But on top of the grey, then I used a really watered down black paint, so it's almost like a wash but quite thick and sloppy. And then, before it was dry, I wiped most of it off with a piece of tissue, only leaving it behind to look really dirty, mainly in the crevices. And then I did a really ferocious dry brush of a light grey over the whole thing. and that was before the rust and the various blood effects and whatnot were added, and I think it looks quite tasty. I've tried to put a few little narrative details in, like you can see there's blood stains right in the corner there as if someone's just died hiding in the corner of that tower, and more rust going on there. I focused more of the rust on the metal areas than anywhere else. For example, on those steel beams or girders at the side there. More blood stains at the bottom there. And here's the smaller tower. You can see some blood on the top there. You'll be able to see that better from another angle in a second. There you go, you can see it running into the grooves in the floor along with the rust. And here's just a single piece. It looks like someone suffered a horrific injury that was bleeding out there in that top left square, which has then started running into the crevices. Here's a little kind of pillbox. Nothing special about that, just a bit of rust. And this partially destroyed building with a nice blood stain on the edge there. Maybe someone was caught in the explosion as it tore that building to shreds, or maybe they just got stuck there. On this piece here, with this broken wall section, I've done some rust around all the little rivets and on the ends of the bits of metal sticking out of the wall, as I imagine rust would form there. You can see the top, there's quite a lot of rust going on in the crevices there. As I imagine, a lot of moisture would build up in those crevices, which would naturally lead to some rust. And I've posed a lot of my plague guys on these buildings as well, such as on here. He looks quite sinister in that shadow. He can see a lot of the terrain set up together, and another guy peeking out there. And I like this shot with the partially destroyed wall and the very nasty stage 1 peeking out in a very aggressive and menacing manner. And these are the batch of pieces that I did second, which have a slightly more greyish than blue colour to them, because I couldn't quite match it. And I thought, you know what, it's not that big of a deal, because it's supposed to look like a broken down, mangled wreck of a city anyway, so not everything has to be exactly the same colour. You can see I really put a lot of rust on this piece here, and there's a bit of blood dripping down in the top right there as well. This gun is also quite rusty, but you can see that I've picked out a few details, little buttons. Some of them are orange or red or yellow. Some barriers with a bit of rust going on. And another one very similar. And another. And some connecting pieces to form little bridges and whatnot, and extra walls if I need a place to be particularly accessible when I rearrange the terrain, because I've set it up so that it's mostly very modular. And that's all of the dead zones. So let's look at these Baleful Realm gates now, which were very easy to do. Sprayed in black, sprayed in grey, dry brush of, I believe it was Dawnstone grey, the Citadel colour. Quite a heavy dry brush of that. And then a dry brush of white, lightly over all the edges. And that was the stone done. The metallic parts, I believe they were all done with the Reaper Master Series Old Bronze colour, because I'm getting really sick of these Citadel metallic paints and how quickly they dry up. And then there was just a wash over that, which was probably Agrat's Earthshade. And then the skulls were very easy, just can't remember if it was Citadel Screaming Skull or an Army Painter bone colour, one or the other. Nothing complicated about them. And then of course the main event, the swirling magical energies in the centre of the portals. So the blue one, that was base coated with a dark blue, dry brushed with a lighter blue, and then you can see the dry brushing gets progressively lighter the more towards the little magical tendrils it gets and the further away from the bulk of the material. And all I did for that was just very slowly lighten the blue with a bit of white paint as it got closer and closer to the edge, and then pure white right on the tips. So I think it's quite a nice effect. The reddy, yellowy, orangey one, that looks a bit like Reverse Flames, is very similar. Started off with red, dry brush over that in orange, and then gradually lightened the orange and it got more and more yellow until it was a mix of yellow and white for the final dry brush. So again, progressively lighter as it reaches the tips. And these were quite quick to paint, really. I think they look much better than the previous piece of terrain I did for Age of Sigmar. I put a bit more effort into these because I thought they looked so cool, and I think they look very good on the table as well. So that is everything I painted during the month of July. We're halfway through August now and I haven't actually finished anything in this month yet, but very close. This month I have a feeling you're going to see some more Dead Zone terrain finished, and some Stormcast Eternals as well, because I'm very close to finishing some of those as we speak. So you should definitely see a few Stormcast models, Dead Zone terrain, maybe a few Dead Zone little accessories like crates as well if I can get them finished in time, hopefully. And I will talk to you again very soon, folks. Ta-ta for now.